Hey there, this is episode 4 of a 5-part series. If you haven't heard parts 1 to 3, I recommend you listen to them before you listen to this.
And there's something that you can hear from everybody, I would say, in Central America, but mostly in El Salvador, that you are always thinking that next year is going to be better. Yeah, even though with a lot of problems, climate, rust, and everything, they are always fighting.
I mean, some people would see that as stupidity.
Yes, probably, but it's the truth. Salvadorian people is very tough to fight for what they want. Yeah.
I'm speaking again with Mauricio Escalón, the man with the great-great-great-great-grandfather Pedro Jose. He today has a thriving coffee business. He's one of the very few in El Salvador who do.
When we decided to do this, one of the things that we put into the table was that we won't see the New York spot again.
As in, he will always get prices higher than the commodity price that the majority of producers in El Salvador are stuck with.
Yeah.
So you do not sell coffee at the New York spot rate?
I don't see that.
Mauricio takes out his phone.
I have my thing here in the phone, the New York spot, but I don't see it. Probably once a year. Yeah.
In the last episode, we explored how 100,000 people left the coffee sector in El Salvador. We went from the collapse of the cooperatives, to the coffee price crisis, to Roya, a horrible disease, and the gangs. But it doesn't affect everybody. There are some elite farmers in this country who have thriving coffee businesses. And in this episode, we're exploring how they do it. We're also going to answer the question, where did those 100,000 people go? And when we buy Salvadoran coffee, who in El Salvador is receiving our money? I'm James Harper, and this is Filter Stories, the untold stories hidden in your cup of coffee. So we've heard a lot about Mauricio's history. On his father's side, we had Pedro Jose, his great-great-great-great-grandfather. On his mother's side, they lost the farm that became the San Carlos II Cooperative, one of the many farms that got caught in the fighting during the Civil War. The Civil War came to an end in the early 90s. And Mauricio's families, on both his mother's side and his father's side, still owned a lot of coffee land. But then, the commodity price for coffee collapsed, and it has remained low for the last 30 years. And many members of his families on both sides decide to get out of coffee.
After 1999, after the crisis, they decided, no, I don't want to be in the coffee business. So who wants to stay, stay. Who don't want to stay, don't stay, yeah?
Mauricio stays, because he sees a way to get paid more than the commodity price.
Let's go just for a specialty coffee. We will find those specialty coffees in our farms.
So, instead of producing generic, low-quality commodity coffee, Mauricio decides to produce high-quality specialty coffees that fetch a much higher price. These are the types of coffees that end up in coffee roasters manned by tattooed hipsters in skinny jeans. But it takes quite a bit to be able to produce and then sell this kind of coffee. But Mauricio had what it took. He had a lot of money in the first place.
Yeah, we were doing volume. We were doing like 50,000 bags a year.
He had a good business education.
Then when I came back to El Salvador in 1997, I started an MBA.
He had the technical expertise.
And we know how to do it. We have the feedback. We have the knowledge.
And then he won a bunch of awards for his coffee, such as the Cup of Excellence.
Yeah. I started to make relationships because of the Cup of Excellence. Yeah.
And he found buyers who were willing to pay higher prices for his higher quality coffees.
What kind of price ranges are your coffees selling for?
I will say like 4 or 5 times the New York spot
Per pound.
per pound. Yes.
So Mauricio earns at least 4 times what most coffee producers in El Salvador earn. He is getting a financially sustainable price. Everybody else isn't. And that's why his farm has grown a hell of a lot since the early 2000s.
So today, how many hectares do you cultivate?
Now we are having 409 hectares. Yeah.
So you've grown.
Yeah, we have grown. Yeah. Yeah.
How's it going?
Very well. Busy these days. Good to see you again.
Good to see you for sure.
Thanks for making
You
the
can
time.
back up your your seat if you need.
Now, I want to introduce you to this other big coffee farmer. His name is Emilio Lopez, and he's just picked me up outside my hostel.
How about we go for some coffee?
Sounds great.
Emilio drives us to the next neighborhood over, and we go into an underground garage. We walk up the stairs and sit down in this glitzy new cafe in a wealthy district of San Salvador.
Quizás un Santa Rosa
We then spend about 5 minutes deciding what kind of coffee we want,
B60 y un lavado en la Chemes. Por favor, vamos a compartir.
and a few minutes later,
The coffee has arrived.
Este es cuál? Finca Santa Rosa.
as we sip these coffees, Emilio tells me that his family in El Salvador was one of the very wealthy land-owning coffee families.
And that at one point they were huge and they were exporting and they were milling and they was the biggest exporter and producer in the country and the biggest mill in the world.
Emilio was born outside of El Salvador, but he came back to get into coffee farming. Now, there's nothing radically different between Emilio's story and Mauricio's, except for the fact Emilio is going all in on mechanization.
I, for example, banned any handsaw or any machetes or any manual tools in our farm about 6 years ago.
He's taking a leaf out of Brazil's book.
If I learned that, the first thing I learned in Brazil, okay, coffee does not mean poverty in this country. I currently have a farm in Brazil that I have neighbors that have only 1 hectare or 2 hectares. They're not poor at all. They have their cars, their tractors. They live very well. They might not be hiring people to work their land, but they have a little tractor that does everything: spraying, weed control, etc. So,
If we zoom out, one of the major reasons behind this coffee price crisis is the fact that there is just too much coffee. And a lot of that is due to Brazil, because they're so productive that even with today's low coffee prices, they're still in business. And that's because they use machines.
I truly believe that traditional farming of coffee is condemning our people to poverty. I'd rather be identified as, oh, he's exploiting the land, or he is mechanizing and like he's reducing the amount of people that he's given work to. I'd rather be labeled like that than someone promoting poverty.
Emilio has escaped the clutches of low commodity prices by growing high quality coffee, mechanizing, and having contacts in the global north who are prepared to pay high prices for his coffees.
So now we own in El Salvador about 250 hectares.
And because he's earning high sustainable prices, he's able to grow his farm, unlike the majority of coffee producers today.
So we've grown 10 times the amount that I started with only as the farm.
And there's one thing you need in particular to succeed if you're going the mechanization route.
Gotta run?
Actually, you know what? My kids' school is just right here.
You also need a great education.
So you're going to have to come with me to pick them up.
Sure, happy to. Yeah, no drama.
So we finish up our coffees
Gracias.
and then head down to the garage to Emilio's car. And then we drive to Emilio's kids' school.
These guys are ready. already in line.
We sit there with the engine off in a line of SUVs under the blazing hot sun for about 45 minutes. Emilio's kids go to one of the most prestigious schools in this city. What better place then to talk about the role of education?
You know, I know farmers, I'm not going to give names, but I know farmers that started off with 1 hectare and now they have 20 hectares because of how well educated they were when they won the award.
He means the Cup of Excellence Awards.
And now they've capitalized on that. That is something that, again, if you're not a middle class farmer in this country, that does not happen.
So how does a small farmer become a producer that can send their kids to a good school?
A tiny little farmer that is not educated, that wins the Cup of Excellence, or that wins any award, or is able to sell their coffee a little better, the first investment that they need to do probably is put their kids to school and then invest in their land. But I don't think you can do both at that level, because the farm needs a lot of investment, and obviously your kids' education needs a lot of investment. Hola, Emilio.
Emilio's car inches forward to the school gates.
Well, this is quite the military operation. You have a woman on a walkie-talkie. Cars proceeding up. It's like royal dignitary picking up, ambassadors.
In a city fighting a war with gangs, the parents of these kids aren't letting them out of their sights for a second.
Buenas tardes.
Hola, Milo. Pasa esto para atrás, mi amor. Gracias, mi vida. Hola, Milo.
Gracias.
Muchas gracias. Adiós. ¿Qué pasó, Chiro? James, perdón.
Hola.
Y él es Milo.
Comer a la escuela.
Aburrida.
¿Cómo?
Aburrida.
So let's take stock for a second. Very small Salvadoran farmers are being slowly ground out of the coffee business by mechanized Brazilian farmers. The only way for them to survive is to mechanize themselves, get into specialty coffee, or both. But they need education and a lot of money. The farmers who are succeeding today because they have the capital and the education are also the same people that used to own most of the coffee lands in the 1970s. Many are from the wealthy families. Today in El Salvador, there's a new imbalance that everyone is talking about.
In 10 years' time, what's it going to look like?
So, unfortunately, this is, I think, what happened and what we have now. So in the 80s, there was an agrarian reform because probably 20 people had 90% of the land or 90% of the business. I think now we've come back to the same situation, that 20 people are in charge of the coffee in El Salvador.
Another question we haven't answered is, where did those 100,000 coffee farmers go?
1990s, we had 150,000 people working.
So I put this question to our economist, Álvaro.
These 100,000 people go.
They're your gang members. They migrated. They died. They came to the city to find misery. I'm going to show you. When we go to the football court that I showed at the beginning, you can see a marginal community that's right next to it.
At the end of our interview, Álvaro leads me to the corner of this private members club.
We are walking up some steps.
Yes, we are going to a small football court.
We walk across the sports court towards a metal fence that separates this private members club from the main road.
Oh, we're jumping onto a ledge.
Yeah.
We're now walking behind the football field on the grass, between the grass and the fence.
We're now right up on the outside fence. And as I look down, I see this steep ravine.
Oh, wow.
You have a different kind of neighborhood.
Oh my God, literally in the shadows.
Yeah.
I mean, this is a private members club.
Yeah.
And literally just below the football pitch is a shanty town.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. You can see the differences in all the inequality.
I mean, it's literally within a matter of 5 meters.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, wow.
Now I can show the video because there's no sound. Because
Álvaro takes out his phone and finds a news report from the 1980s.
The poor in El Salvador are very poor, the majority housed in shanty towns like this one in the heart of the capital. 70% of the children under 5 suffer from malnutrition. 1 in 10 dies at birth. And mothers give birth to an average of 6 children each. Hence, El Salvador has the highest population density in Latin America, a population which has been ruthlessly exploited for more than a century by a tiny handful of very rich families. They live up the hill 2 miles from the shanty towns in palatial residences. Jon Snow, News at 10, La Lavora, El Salvador.
There it is. There it is.
So it's nearly 40 years after. We still have the shanty towns. And the posh neighborhoods on the video, they're just like 10 blocks away. And you see the structural causes of inequality still remain. Mm-hmm. So that's what they cause the war. That's what they cause the violence. So that's what I wanted to show you.
Extraordinary.
Álvaro and I make our way off the football pitch.
Yes.
By the way, the guard was checking us out because we were suspicious. And then,
I mean, we look pretty suspicious.
yeah.
I mean, well,
Yeah, you're a reporter. And,
yeah.
and I usually come here, but with a football. You know?
Right, not some Caucasian guy with a microphone.
Yeah.
Let's zoom out now and take stock of everything we've covered across these 4 episodes. When our parents, our grandparents, happily drank Salvadoran coffees throughout the 20th century, their money flowed into a system that denied the majority of Salvadorans economic opportunities. This was a major reason behind the 1932 Indigenous Massacre. The United Nations has a permanent forum that addresses the needs of indigenous people. In their 6th forum, they address the issues of land, stating in their documents that indigenous people's relationship with their lands and territories is said to form a core part of their identity and spirituality, and land is deeply rooted in their culture and history. Here is a thought. Had indigenous Salvadorans not been marginalized, perhaps their connection to their land would remain stronger, and Salvadorans today wouldn't be emigrating as much. After the Indigenous Massacre of '32, the system didn't change very much. Poorer Salvadorans were still denied economic opportunities to progress, while a handful of very wealthy families made a lot of money from coffee. This is the underlying tension that led to the Civil War and the huge wave of migration in the 80s. In October 2018, the International Organization for Migration conducted a rapid survey of a group of Salvadoran migrants who were in a caravan headed for America. Half of them said economic opportunity is the reason for them leaving. Another 20% cited violence and insecurity. 2% wanted to be reunited with their families in America, and about 30% said it was a combination of all these things. These are the same reasons we covered in part 3 about the collapse of El Salvador's coffee sector. Low prices have made it extremely difficult to survive financially, and many young Salvadorans can't work in coffee because of gang violence. So here's one more thought. When we, today, buy specialty coffees from El Salvador, the odds are our money goes to the larger coffee farms owned by the descendants of the wealthy coffee families. Our specialty coffee dollars are most likely not ending up in the hands of El Salvador's marginalized coffee farmers. So are we denying economic opportunities to the same people our parents and grandparents did? In the next episode, let's explore how we can get our coffee dollars to historically marginalized Salvadorans. And not just marginalized Salvadorans, because El Salvador's history is as bloody and unjust as many countries that were colonized by Europeans. We have to find a way to send our coffee dollars to marginalized coffee producers across the world. Thank you for listening. So, did you know I have a newsletter? I send it once every month or 2 months. It has recommendations to other podcasts that I really recommend that you check out. It has details of upcoming Filter Stories live shows, has my travel plans if you want to meet up for a coffee. If you want to subscribe, there's a link to it in the episode description. I also want to mention the second big way to help independent podcasters like me is to write a review on Apple Podcasts. Just write what you think about the show. It's a powerful way of helping people like you, intelligent, thoughtful coffee drinkers, to find this show. There's a link to a place where you can write a review on Apple Podcasts in the episode description as well. This episode was sound mixed by Dom Edgley. He's a freelance sound professional. You can find him at domedgleysound.com. And the Filter Stories logo was created by Headquarters, a branding and packaging design team. Find more of their work at headquarters.studio. Thanks so much. Speak to you next time.